because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent his only Son to the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. So as I'm sure everyone has heard me talk about before, when I was in high school, I was not exactly the most religious person in the world. In fact, I couldn't really stand any sort of religion or the thought of it. I thought that all religion was narrow-minded and only for people who weren't educated, because obviously in high school I knew everything and was the smartest person in the world. But when I was a junior in high school was when my grandfather passed away, my dad's dad, granddaddy. This was the first time that anyone close to me had ever passed away. And it was the first time that I ever had the thought that I couldn't do everything on my own. Because up to this point in high school, I wanted, like I said, absolutely nothing to do with religion. But as one of my friends reminded me recently, this time in my life was the first time that I made any mention of, I guess, finally feeling overwhelmed or needing something other than myself to deal with my life's problems. It didn't last very long though at this point. Because a few weeks later I was back to not needing anyone or anything to help me. Because I really kind of, I guess you could say, enjoyed my non-religious life. And I think the reason for that is best stated in this book, Pastrix, by a lady named Nadia Bolz-Weber. And it says, with her talking about she's talking about trying to help a friend at this point, and kind of enjoying her dark times in her life. And it says, the last thing I want is for any light to be cast on the darkness that I've spent so much energy curating, protecting, and enjoying. And I feel like that fits really well, because I think the reason that I loved my non-religious life was just because I could spend all of my time focusing on myself and being completely selfish and not having to worry about anybody else. I also kind of loved the feeling of being like a rebel, or not being the person that did everything perfectly and never did anything bad, because I knew what I was going to do with my life, and I knew that no one else could get me there at that point in time, because I was going to move to New York and become an actor at that point. That worked out really well. So the next time that I moved past that and realized I needed something else in my life was during my senior year of high school, and even more so during my freshman year of college. I was at University of Memphis at the time. And this was the first time in my life that I wasn't constantly surrounded by tons of friends and activities to distract myself, and I needed to find some sort of group or community to immerse myself in. And that's when I found the Presbyterians. Religion, I still didn't like it at this point, but I was more open to it. Being in a group of Presbyterians was still kind of rebellious to what I had grown up to be. It still is. And I think that's why I liked it. But I also liked it because I was always, it sounds weird, but I was always like good at religion or something, like being religious. I was always that person that was kind of like the poster child and immersed myself in every single thing and had to take over every situation and be the face of it. And so my road to where I am now has been an incredibly bumpy one, filled with confusion, frustration, low self-esteem, and altogether unhappiness. And then I got here to U of A and found UCM because I was afraid of slipping back into the loneliness that was my time at Memphis. And I didn't want to continue to feel, I guess, exiled. And I use the term exile coming from another book that I used for this. That is one by Rob Bell called Jesus Wants to Save Christians. And it talks about how exile is when you find yourself a stranger to the purposes of God. And I really like that. And I liked even more that this book repeatedly talks about God always hears the cry of the oppressed. When things aren't working for us and they're not going really well in our lives, that's when we are more open to seeing where God is trying to put us in places in our lives. Because the moments that usually shape us are the really crappy ones, I think. When everything is fine and dandy, we don't want or allow God to use us because we think we can do everything on our own. The experiences that I've gone through have shown me that the place where I see God now most of the time is through community, relationships, friends, and family, and even more so in the love that is shown in those circles. There are so many times that you'll hear me talking about my family or showing ridiculous pictures or telling ridiculous stories about things that me and my brothers do to mess with each other. And how incredibly awesome and amazing I think my family is. The same is true of my friends. I tell my family just about as much as I tell you guys and stuff about, but this time I'm usually talking about my friends and stuff. The weird stories and weird things that I do and all of that. I've also always kind of done this thing where I put my friends and parents and siblings, pretty much everyone in my life, on a pedestal or like a level above me, because of the things that my friends and family have experienced or gone through or accomplished in their life. But I think it's actually a good thing that I do this because I use it to inspire me and to encourage me to reach my goals. And I think I'm incredibly lucky to have people in my life that can support me through doing all of that. So God has always revealed to me through the love and relationships that I have. God shows up to do something when we realize that we're not enough and our lives are unmanageable. This is because oftentimes we're forced to focus on the love that is there in our lives. That love is God. The verse doesn't say God has love or God gives love. It says God is love. And as I said earlier, God always hears the cry of the oppressed. I don't always like to admit that God has a plan for my life or that I have a calling as much as people tell me or yell at me that I do. I don't like to admit that God uses me sometimes too, even if I'm told that God has slapped me in the face during something. But I'm slowly realizing that God using me doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to change into some completely different person from who I am now. Growing up, I always heard stories of people that lived lives that they didn't characterize as good. It was always usually some person that was a big public speaker that apparently went through some ridiculously tragic thing, but then came out and now even their friends and family can't recognize them because they just do so many different things, or they don't associate with the people that they used to because they don't feel that they're good people for them to be around. But then they would continue to tell their story about how they found God or were reborn, and now they're a completely different person. And I never liked this thought for my life, because I like who I am. I like the talents that I have. I like my personality. I talk a lot. I'm in your face. And I'm a very crude person, and I know that, and I don't apologize for it. But I think God uses these aspects of my personality in my life to whatever purpose God has. We see or hear God through other mediums these days than a giant voice yelling at us from the sky. We see God like I do in family or friends, or through our own studies, or our experiences, or our talents. And all of these aspects are things that we are aspects of who we are naturally, are things that God uses in us to reveal God's self to other people. Because God needs a body to reveal God's self to other people. That's how we see God these days, or at least that's how I see God. But in the end, whatever way we end up, all of these things combine to show us the map of our lives, whether we're kicking or screaming or going completely on our own will. But in the end, whatever way we go in life, God will constantly be opening new doors for us to use our talents and share our experiences. We just have to be willing to let who we are and who God has made us to show us where we need to